$2 billion, which is the largest in the last 29 years. It has not recovered even today. So for all this, America had to borrow money from outside. It was importing goods, exporting less. And it was importing goods and using that power as an economic power to attract people to its market. So the whole world was glued to the American market. How to export to America became a kind of a policy direction for all the countries. First Japan did it, Korea, Taiwan, all these Asian tigers, then China. And when they earned the dollar, they were only earning promissory notes. Today, China has in its hand $2.5 trillion earned from exports to America, which is nothing but the promissory notes issued by the United States of America. And having taken, exported, imported these goods and given these pro notes, and they have taken back the dollar, and this became some kind of a dollar recycling. This became the biggest problem of America to manage, but America was managing because of only one reason. There was no difference between their local exchange and foreign exchange. In fact, in the Newsweek magazine this time, there is an article which shows that the White House is upside down to say how America, like what Vaidyanathan said, that it is likely to tumble down as a superpower, in which they say the most important thing which has saved the United States of America is the fact that the dollar is the national currency as well as the global reserve. If dollar had not, by historical reasons, is not the occasion to explain how the dollar became the global currency, that if the dollar had not become the global currency, America could not have had the facility of borrowing money, because it was borrowing money which was its own currency. Another important factor about which many of us have been trying to search for the reasons. America has printed so far about $920 billion. 2/3 of this dollar is circulating outside America, and this has been happening for the last 25 years. How 2/3 of the American dollar is circulating outside India, outside America, it has virtually become some kind of a currency for the world. In the result, the world has got hooked to America. Anything that is happening to America will impact upon the whole world. And this is particularly true of countries which have huge forex reserves in dollars, which have huge exports to make to America, and that is where Vaidyanathan distinguished it, that the Indian economy is more domestic consumption driven, it is not foreign investment driven, it is local savings driven. So, if you take the last 20 years from 1991 to 2009, Shankaracharya, the former advisor to the government of India, wrote an article in Business Standard about 7-8 months ago, where he said the total amount of foreign investment that had come into India is just 2% of the total investment made in India. 98% of the investment has been generated in this country. That is what has disengaged in the Indian economy from the rest of the world. Now, what is the cause of the crisis? The cause of the crisis in the United States of America is that the government was borrowing money and spending, the corporates were borrowing money and spending, households were borrowing money and spending, and there was no net national saving. With the result, they had to borrow money from the rest of the world, and government was borrowing, corporates were borrowing, banks were borrowing, and the rest of the world was lending. Today, out of $8.2 trillion of foreign exchange reserves all over the world, 66% is kept in terms of dollars, that is the money lent to the United States of America, out of the reserves which the rest of the world is keeping. For example, our forex reserves is about $280 million. About 2/3 of it is in terms of dollars. That means that is the money we have lent to the United States of America. In fact, there was an article written by one of the Chinese economists, replying to the charge that people say that China has grown by American investment. This article was written sometime in 1995 or 96. the total amount of investment that had come into China from America was $85 billion. But the total amount of money that China has lent to America at that time was $350 billion. If you look at what is the amount of money that has come into America by way of either FDI or FII investment, it will be in the range of about $80–85 billion. But the amount of money that India has lent to America, which is in the form of forex reserves, is at least $200 billion. And so every country has a vested interest in the survival of the economy of the United States of America. And now, there is crisis in America. And the crisis is because the families which borrowed money on the house or on their credit cards or on the stocks, they are not able to pay the debt back. This is the subprime crisis. They have lent money to people who are not credit worthy and they are unable to return the money. And the monies which they have, which the banks, American banks have lent to the households, all their mortgages were consolidated and turned into consolidated debt obligations and sold to the rest of the world. It is banks in Germany, banks in France, banks in Japan, banks in India. Even ICICI had lent about $1 billion on the consolidated debt obligations. Today the consolidated debt obligations are partly bad debt, and that is what has transformed into subprime crisis. American people are not paying to the American banks, so American banks have not been able to pay to the rest of the world. That is how the American government had to step in. You know what is the amount of relief that the American government has contemplated over the period to manage the crisis? It is something like $23 trillion. $23 trillion is the amount of relief which America has contemplated to revive the American economy. Today the American budget deficit this year for September 2009 is $1.6 trillion. All the estimates show out of which the amount which America can raise within America from banks, from mutual funds, households are not taking the American treasury securities and they are net sellers. And so all that America can raise is about $1 trillion, and $600 billion will be needed from outside, and America has another $1.6 trillion of debt with 12 months maturity which is falling due, which means they will be needing something like $2.2 trillion, and no country in the world will be able to fund this debt, and the only way America can manage is to print more dollars. This shows the depth of the crisis. It is not an ordinary crisis. It is the crisis of an economic model based on a living model, which is an outcome of a cultural model. That is now posing the greatest danger to a country whose currency had become the global currency. American currency became global currency in 1950 because America said we have so much of gold, if you have dollar it is equal to gold. In 1970 they said we are not going to give gold for the dollar will be only our pronote. By which time the world had got used to a common currency, and the entire global capitalism was built on the strength of a common currency. In the year 1993, Akio Morita, the chairman of the Sony Corporation, he said that you cannot have global trade or globalization without a global currency, and a global currency cannot be allowed to be printed by one country. It has to be some strong countries coming together, having a common governance model and a discipline of printing and circulating the currencies. It should not be left to the printing machines of a particular country to expand that currency.